Nora Jameson had never imagined she would one day witness a military helicopter landing right behind her small cabin by the forest. The sight alone was surreal enough, but the reason it had come was beyond anything she had ever imagined. 3 weeks earlier, in what seemed like an ordinary moment at the airport, Nora had given up her first-class seat for a stranger, a man whose face was marked with deep burn scars. She had no idea that simple act of kindness would set her on a journey that would change her life forever. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Social Justice. Let's begin. Nora bolted upright. The small cabin on the edge of Oregon's forest wasn't a place where noise was common, especially not at 5:47 a.m. in the middle of autumn. At first, she thought it was an earthquake, but the picture frames didn't fall. They only trembled slightly. And then the sound became too clear to mistake, the rhythmic beating of helicopter blades, drawing closer. The bedroom windows rattled, and what Nora saw through the glass almost made her drop her phone. A large, ivory-colored helicopter with moss-green stripes was descending into her backyard, right onto the patch of grass where she had planted tomatoes last season. Across its side, bold letters read, "United States of America." Nora stood frozen. This wasn't a dream. It couldn't be. Not with the helicopter's floodlights shining straight into her messy kitchen, illuminating the forgotten coffee mug from last night and the robe draped over the chair. The rotors spun slowly now, stirring up strong gusts that made pine needles fall like rain. Through the cold white light, she could see uniformed figures moving briskly, efficient, precise. Something serious was happening. But the more serious it seemed, the more surreal it felt. Who was she, after all, for a military helicopter to land behind her house? A knock came at the door. 3 firm, deliberate knocks. Not rushed, but enough to make her heart lurch. Nora glanced at herself in the mirror, messy hair, an old striped nightgown, worn-out fuzzy slippers. Without thinking, she hurried to the door. A man in a black suit wearing an official badge greeted her politely. "Ms. Jameson, we apologize for the abrupt arrival. There's someone who wishes to meet you. If you could, please be ready within 15 minutes. Nora's eyes widened. Before she could even ask a question, the man gave a respectful nod and turned away. She stood there for a few stunned seconds, unsure whether she should feel worried, scared, or curious. Because there was one thing Nora didn't know yet. The person waiting for her outside was someone she had thought she would never see again. Before the helicopter, before the thank yous and the floodlights shining down on a tiny house in the woods, Nora Jameson was just an ordinary woman, quiet, diligent, almost invisible in the glamorous world of travel. She worked at Sky Ease Travel, a small but well-loved travel agency known for its personalized service. For over 6 years, Nora had helped others plan their dream journeys, honeymoons to the Maldives, pilgrimages to Japan, round-trip tickets to Paris during spring bloom, even though she herself had never set foot in any of those places. Would you prefer a suite with a balcony or one with an ocean view bathtub? She would ask clients with gentle precision, as if she were planning her own trip. If anyone asked about her latest vacation, Nora would just smile and quietly reply, 3 days at my mom's cabin, where cell service is weaker than the morning coffee. Sometimes there was a flicker of sadness, but Nora never complained. This was simply her way, calm, unassuming, yet pouring her heart into every customer she served. Her co-workers often said, Nora doesn't just sell tickets, she sells experiences. So when her younger sister Claire announced she was getting married in Vancouver and pleaded, "You have to come, I'm not getting married without you," Nora knew she would go, even if it meant draining every last penny from her savings. She planned to book an economy seat, like always. But a few days later, she found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a first-class ticket, along with a handwritten note from Tara, her closest co-worker. "We pooled our reward points and pulled some strings. No one deserves a first-class seat for the first time more than you." Nora was speechless, not because of the gift itself, but because someone had thought of her so gently, so sincerely. For weeks afterward, Nora floated in a little dream. She read every review about first-class service, looked up photos of gourmet in-flight meals, even practiced ordering coffee in a slightly more confident tone. Claire teased, "I'm starting to wonder if you're coming for the wedding or for the seat." Nora just laughed. "I'm coming for you, but honestly, who wouldn't be excited to fly like a princess, just once?" The morning of the flight, Nora wore a soft ivory sweater dress, polished yet comfortable. She arrived at the airport 3 hours early, simply because she couldn't wait any longer. While waiting at the gate, gazing out at the aircraft, she noticed something. A man sitting in the far corner, alone, strikingly so. No one sat near him. A mother ushered her child away. A businessman walked past, pretending to remember a phone call. Nora glanced again, and this time she understood why. Half of the man's face was marked by severe burns, scars stretching across his frame, his hand, even his gaze. But what caught her attention most was his expression. No anger, no pleading, just a quiet, heartbreaking acceptance. The same look she had once seen in her father's eyes, after a stroke had paralyzed half his face. He used to say, "Sometimes I wish I were truly invisible, because being seen with pity hurts more than not being seen at all." When boarding began, the man struggled to pick up a small bag that had slipped from his trembling hand. People walked around him, no one bent down, except Nora. She crouched, gathering the fallen items, a tube of toothpaste, a toothbrush. "Thank you," he said, voice low but warm. Nora smiled softly and accidentally glanced at his boarding pass. 38D, middle seat, last row, 14 hours, crammed between strangers, carrying scars and the weight of all the stairs. Nora straightened up. She didn't know why she did it. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't calculated. It just felt impossible to walk away. "Excuse me, would you like to switch seats? I'm sitting in 2A, first class." "Excuse me, would you like to switch seats? I'm sitting in 2A, first class." The words fell into the air like a quiet drop in a crowded terminal. No one noticed. There was no applause, no movie soundtrack swelling in the background, just two people. One standing, steady and sincere, one looking up, stunned. The man froze. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Not refusal, but disbelief. "Are you sure?" His voice was deep, rough, touched by the weariness of someone used to being glanced over or stared at. Nora didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gently held out the first-class ticket, as if it wasn't a gift, but simply a small act of fairness. "I think today you need that space and comfort more than I do," she said, her voice light as the breeze slipping through the terminal windows. He hesitated. His scarred hand trembled slightly as he accepted the ticket. "I can't remember the last time someone offered me anything without that look of pity attached," he said quietly. "I'm not pitying you," Nora replied softly, without thinking. "I just see you." The gate agent blinked in surprise when they approached. "Are you sure, ma'am?" he asked again, as if Nora had just refused a winning lottery ticket. She nodded and walked slowly past the gleaming, luxurious first-class cabin all the way to the back of the plane, to row 38D, cramped and barely desirable. The next 14 hours were very different. Nora found herself squeezed between a teenage gamer and an elderly woman who kept nodding off onto her shoulder. She ate rubbery chicken and soggy vegetables, tried to sleep but couldn't, tried to stretch but there was no room. At one point, on her way to the bathroom, she passed through the first-class cabin. The man was sitting there, calm, in a spacious seat, a glass of wine on his tray, a white cloth napkin on his lap. The difference between their worlds stark, almost surreal. Their eyes met. He half rose from his seat, maybe to offer it back, or at least to ask if she regretted it. But Nora simply smiled and gave a small nod. No words, no explanations needed. That nod was enough. Before the plane landed, a different flight attendant approached Nora holding a neatly folded napkin. "The gentleman in 2A asked me to give you this." Inside, written in a firm but slightly shaky hand, were the words, "I will not forget your kindness. Thank you for seeing me, not just the scars." Nora carefully folded the napkin and tucked it into her handbag, like a fragile but priceless memory. A first-class ticket, traded for a few square inches of napkin. It didn't seem like a fair exchange, but to Nora, it was the most priceless trade she could ever make. She never learned his name, never knew his rank, only that she had done the right thing, and sometimes that, alone, was the greatest reward. 3 weeks passed. Nothing seemed to change, at least on the surface. Nora Jameson returned to her desk at Sky Ease Travel with her usual old coffee mug, her computer screen filled with itineraries to Bali, Rome, New York. For clients she treated like family, even though they were strangers. The napkin from that flight, flattened and carefully pressed, now rested quietly inside a locked leather notebook in her top drawer. No boasting, no retelling. To Nora, it was a memory meant just for herself. That morning, Oregon was wrapped in thicker fog than usual. 5:47 a.m., a strange sound rumbled from far away, deep and heavy like an echo from the forest. But it wasn't the wind, it wasn't a truck. It was something stronger, heavier. Whump, whump, whump. Nora's heart skipped a beat inexplicably. She rushed to the window and froze. The white helicopter, with military green stripes and the words United States of America, was descending again, right behind her house. She couldn't even remember what she was wearing when she opened the door, only that her heart was pounding too fast for logic to keep up. 3 knocks sounded, deliberate, steady, unrushed. A man in a black suit stood on the porch. "Ms. Jameson, there's someone who wishes to see you. If possible, please be ready within 15 minutes. No further explanation. Nora turned back inside, hands trembling. She threw on a plain white shirt and hastily tied her hair. Peeking through the kitchen curtain, she saw them. Small clusters of figures gathered near the helicopter, some in full-dress uniforms, others in black suits with earpieces. One man separated from the group. He walked toward her, slow, steady, strong. A decorated military uniform, medals gleaming across his chest, a cap tilted at just the right angle, and a face, partly shadowed by the brim but unmistakable. The right side still bore the scars of burns, now even clearer in the soft forest light. Nora couldn't find her voice. "Ms. Jameson," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deep but warm. "I'm a colonel with the United States Special Forces. We met on the flight to Vancouver." Nora shook his hand, still struggling to breathe. "I didn't realize you're military," she stammered. He nodded slightly. "At that time, I was just a man seeking medical treatment in Canada. Now, things are different. 3 days after returning, I was awarded the Medal of Honor at the White House." Nora's eyes widened, her mouth falling open, unable to form words. "During my acceptance speech," he continued, "I told a story about a woman who gave up her first-class seat to a stranger for no reason other than pure kindness. That story touched a lot of people, including the president and the first lady." Nora stood there, not because she didn't understand, but because this was all so far beyond anything she could have imagined when she made that small choice at the airport. "I came here to thank you," he said, pausing for a heartbeat, "in a way that matches what you gave." The first rays of sunlight pierced through the treetops, casting a soft golden mist over the backyard. The helicopter had powered down now, still and majestic, like a symbol torn from a documentary screen and dropped into her ordinary life. The colonel stood beside Nora, his hand resting lightly on the brim of his cap. "I understand this might feel overwhelming," he said gently. Nora struggled for words. "I just gave up a seat, that's all." "No," he said quietly, "you did much more. You saw a human being, where others only saw scars. He signaled subtly, and a young officer stepped forward, handing Nora a dark brown leather folder. Inside was a formal document bearing the seal of the Special Forces, with her name clearly printed. "We have something we'd like to offer you," he said. "A very special journey." Before Nora could ask, "Where to?" she found herself being escorted toward Marine One, the presidential helicopter she had only ever glimpsed in news clips. The interior left her breathless. Dark leather seats, polished wooden panels, soft lighting like a high-level boardroom, no flight attendants, no advertisements, only the profound silence of significance. The helicopter lifted off, smoothly, effortlessly. Through the rounded windows, Nora watched her tiny house shrink into the mist, the garden patch where she'd once planted mint and tomatoes fading into a soft memory. "Where are we going?" she finally managed to ask, voice trembling slightly. The colonel smiled, and for the first time he looked unburdened. "Andrews Air Force Base," he said. "That's just the first stop." At Andrews, Nora was led to a C-37A Gulfstream, the military's special variant of a luxury jet. If Marine One had amazed her, the interior of the Gulfstream nearly left her speechless. Her fingers brushed the glossy oak grain, the soft beige leather seats, the thick wide windows letting in sunlight like a living painting. "This cabin is usually reserved for generals, diplomatic envoys, and those deemed to have made extraordinary impacts," the colonel explained. "Today, that person is you." The plane began to taxi. "We're taking you to a place called Silent Bay," he said, "a military retreat facility on an isolated island off the Pacific coast. It's not listed on any travel maps. Very few have ever set foot there." "But why me?" Nora asked quietly. He answered without hesitation, "Because you didn't ask what's in it for me, because you didn't need to know who I was. You didn't record it, you didn't post it online, you just were kind. And the world needs more of that now than ever." Nora turned to the window. Below, the ordinary world, streets, houses, lives, slowly blurred away as if making room for something larger, deeper, and maybe that was the truest definition of a reward. As the plane descended, Nora saw patches of green slowly emerging below, but it wasn't a city, and it wasn't a bustling international airport. It was a hidden strip of land in the middle of the vast ocean. No control tower, no signage, just a white sandy beach, swaying coconut palms, and a narrow road leading deep into a dense jungle. "Silent Bay," the colonel said quietly, as if even the name itself should be spoken with reverence. "It used to be a secret retreat for special operations officers recovering from surgeries or injuries. Now, it's reserved for a very select few." From the moment Nora's feet touched the ground, everything moved to a different rhythm, quieter, slower, yet filled with deep respect. No one asked who she was. No one acted surprised to see a civilian among them. Instead, everyone smiled, nodded, as if they already knew exactly what she had done and why she deserved to be there. The room Nora was given sat on a hillside, facing directly toward the ocean. There was no luxurious excess, but every detail was crafted with touching care. Wide open windows to welcome the sea breeze. A worn but polished wooden desk with a leather-bound journal placed neatly atop. Beside it, a small card that read simply, "We can't sell tickets to this place, but for people like you, we open it with all our gratitude." In the days that followed, Nora experienced things she had never seen in any travel brochure. A helicopter ride over hidden waterfalls deep within the rainforest, places even locals didn't know existed. Dinners by the beach, no music, only the soft crash of waves and whispered stories from officers about narrow escapes and battles both seen and unseen. A morning walk with a female military doctor who shared how this island had once been a haven for soldiers. not just healing from physical wounds, but from the invisible ones too. But what moved Nora the most was when a young pilot invited her on a special flight, with no set destination. The colonel said, "You should see this place from above, at sunset," he said with a smile. It's the place he visited after his final surgery, alone. The helicopter soared around the island, skimming rugged cliffs, then suddenly dipped low, revealing a hidden valley surrounded entirely by towering mountains. At its center, a waterfall plunged straight into a crystal-clear lake, the surrounding rainforest bathed in golden, honey-like sunset light. "There's no way in by foot, no name on any map," the pilot said over the intercom. He once said, "If heaven existed, it would probably look like this." Nora sat in silence, fingers gripping the seat strap gently. No words, just the overwhelming sense that a part of her, the part that once believed she was ordinary, invisible, unremarkable, had been seen, acknowledged, in a way she never expected. And it had all started with a simple question: would you like to switch seats with me? The final evening at Silent Bay unfolded under a strange, tender atmosphere, warm yet quiet, as if the entire island was holding its breath, trying to preserve something precious. The beach was softly lit by oil lamps set inside white seashells. The waves lapped gently, filling the silences between half-told stories. Nora sat on a wicker chair beside a long wooden table, a light glass of wine in hand, and simple dishes prepared with a rare kind of care and reverence. No one called her an honored guest. There were no speeches, only presence, and the warm glances of those who had once emerged from the darkest edges of war, now finding their way back to themselves. As Nora watched the sunset slipping behind the palm trees, the colonel approached. This time he wore no uniform, just a simple sand-colored polo and khaki pants. Strangely, he looked more commanding, and yet more human, than ever before. He sat down beside her, saying nothing at first, just staring out across the darkening sea. After a long pause, he spoke, slowly, as if weighing each word. "The treatment in Vancouver was more successful than we hoped. Next month, I'll return for the final procedure." Nora smiled. "That's wonderful," she said, and meant it with all her heart. He nodded, then turned to face her, his gaze no longer that of a man shadowed by scars, but of someone on the verge of making an important decision. "Last time, I was afraid to fly," he admitted. "It felt like I was walking alone into the dark. This time," he paused, "I've booked 2 first-class seats." He hesitated just a moment, then added softly, almost like an offering, "The second seat is for you, if you'll come with me." Nora looked at him, not with surprise, but with a deep understanding, because she knew this invitation wasn't born of gratitude. It wasn't about paying a debt. It was about a bond that had formed, a bond that needed no labels. "I'm not military," she said gently. "I'm not family. I don't belong to your world." She said it not to refuse, but to test the truth of his offer. He smiled, a quiet, genuine smile. "You were the first person to see me, without seeing the burns," he said, "and sometimes that matters more than any medal." The ocean breeze played with Nora's hair. The sun had completely disappeared behind the horizon. She glanced into her swirling glass of wine, then gazed far out, where the sea and sky melted into one endless twilight. "I'll go," she said, as softly as a breath, "not for the seat, not for the reward, but because I never wanted anyone to fly alone through the dark." As the plane lifted off from Silent Bay Island, the early morning sun cast a soft golden glow over the water. Nora sat by the window, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the person who simply helped others reach their dreams. She was living a journey no first-class ticket could ever buy. She wore no fancy dress, carried no luxury luggage. She was simply a woman, returning from a journey no one had expected, but one she would never forget. When the plane landed at the military airfield, and Nora was driven back to her small cabin on the edge of Oregon's woods, Everything looked just as it had before. The mist still drifted across the pine trees. The old bicycle still leaned against the porch. The worn wooden chair still sat waiting for the afternoon sun, but she knew something inside her had changed forever. A small package sat quietly on the porch, wrapped in plain brown paper tied with rough twine. No stamps, no sender's name. Inside was a detailed model of the Marine One helicopter, mounted on a wooden base with a small engraved plaque that read, "Some people collect luxury experiences. Others, like you, collect moments of kindness. Thank you for reminding me which one matters more." A folded note was tucked beside it, written in the familiar, slightly slanted but strong handwriting of the colonel himself. "Nora, I once thought the greatest thing I could ever do was saving my team from the fire. But you taught me that sometimes a quiet act, like giving up a seat, can save a part of someone they thought they had lost forever. Thank you for seeing me, not as a medal, not as a scar, but as a man worth carrying forward." From that day on, the miniature Marine One sat on Nora's desk at Sky Ease Travel, surrounded by old postcards from former clients, frayed world maps, and the schedule of flights she continued to arrange for others. Whenever someone asked, "What's that little helicopter?" she would simply smile, not telling the whole story, just enough. "Oh, it reminds me," she would say, "that kindness doesn't need conditions, and sometimes it can fly farther than any ticket I ever booked." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget, like to help kindness spread farther. Subscribe to hear more heartwarming stories. Watch the next video showing on screen. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next story.